Hello, this is Robert Rickover at Body Learning. And my guest today is Imogen Ragone, who's an Alexander Technique teacher and website designer who lives in Wilmington, Delaware. And we're going to talk today about the latest of quite a series of innovations in Alexander Technique directing that's occurred over the past 10 years or so. And this particular development was, how should I say, invented by or discovered by Imogen herself. So, Imogen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Robert.
Uh,
Um, yeah, go ahead.
so, I'm going to ask you to actually talk directly about that direction, but to start with. But I just want to say that there, as I said, over the past 10 years, there's been quite a few new developments, all of which I believe are improvements over Alexander's earlier directions,
Sort of
starting
the
with
classic,
the
yeah.
classic directions, starting with Missy Vineyard's negative directions, also related to them, paradoxical negative directions,
Mm. Yes,
freedom,
I like those.
those are great, yeah. Freedom directions, a product of Jennifer Roy Francoli, our colleague in Cincinnati.
Mhm.
And we're also going and this latest version from Imogen kind of is combining those directions with some ideas from Mio Morales, an Alexander teacher in uh, I don't know where he is,
Oregon. He's in
Oregon,
Oregon, yeah.
Oregon. Um, and Imogen, why don't you describe the direction that you initially came up with that that we then started expanding upon?
Well, that was the one I shared with you, to be honest. I've been using it in various ways, but the direction I decided to share with you that I'd been um, having fun with was I am free to notice. So I am free. So it is a freedom. It is a form of Jennifer's freedom direction. So I am free to notice ease in my feet.
Hmm.
And this way of phrasing it, and I had sort of other places in the body as well. Um, this way of thinking of including this noticing ease, this comes directly from Mio Morales's work, where he encourages you to notice ease in different places in your body, and the it's pretty much people notice that when they notice ease in one place, they get easier all over.
Hmm.
And when
Hmm.
we're paying attention to tension, on the other hand, that tends to um, spread too.
Hmm.
So it seemed very helpful to notice ease. And he has his own way of doing that and asking questions about that. Um, but I kept coming back because I love the freedom directions from Jennifer, and it seemed most helpful to me um, to put that ease right into the freedom direction, um, because that in itself, I am free. Just that in itself is a helpful phrase.
Hmm. Hmm.
In freeing me up. And even I'm free to notice something is helpful. If I just think I'm free to notice my feet, um, that is helping me maybe be aware of something. I'm free to notice my breath. It's bringing our attention to something in the moment.
Hmm.
Um, so then my sequence of thinking was then, well, I'm free to notice ease in my feet, or wherever. Um, and that so there's anyway, so that was the initial. I don't want to say too much more about it immediately, but that was the initial direction, or one of the ways I was kind of thinking about it, and I found that little formula helpful. I am free to notice ease in, and then kind of name some place in my body.
Right. And after you sent that to me, I experimented with it, and the results
Yes,
were
and in that,
pretty interesting.
and I think in that experiment, I asked you to just kind of be in walking, right? We were
I used
experimenting in
walking, yeah.
walking,
Hmm.
and I think I asked you to kind of compare just being aware of your walking, or maybe I can't remember, but I asked you to then to think about maybe I'm free to notice
I think I might have
this
just
feet.
used I'm free
Yeah,
as the comparison, which works
yeah,
quite well.
hmm,
But there was an added
yeah,
something more happened when I tacked on the I'm free to notice
hmm,
ease in my feet. I have to say, initially I was a little surprised at your choice of the feet, but as the first entry point.
Well,
But
it was actually just what I just decided to send you in that moment, but I
well,
think it was quite a good one. So, yeah.
I do think it's a good one, and this might be more for another podcast, but it has created in me a whole new appreciation of what our feet do,
Mm,
and which I don't really want to go into right now, except to say that they not only are our main, most forceful interaction with the earth,
mm,
with in general. I mean, there's a lot of pressure that comes onto your feet when you move about, but your feet also have to send information to your brain, and your brain's quite a long ways away. So
mhm.
um, I think feet, and I think one could almost make a case. I'm going out on an Alexander limb here, but one could almost make a case that the contact between your feet, or perhaps more specifically the soles of your feet
Mhm.
and the earth, is at least as primary as the head neck relationship. But that's for another
Wow.
podcast. Yeah. But I experimented with it and I just expanded it to other parts of me. And I actually wrote a little blog about running through a sequence, starting with my feet, going up ankles, legs, so on, up to
And that's
my head.
and that's so funny because that's exactly what I've been doing, that sort of
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
And in fact, in the little Power Pause audio,
Hmm.
um, that's part of the talk through that I do is that exact not the
Right.
exact sequence you came up with, but kind of going through different places in the body with I'm free to notice ease in my blank.
Starting at one end and going to the other, and then
Yeah.
perhaps going back. Or another way I've found to be very interesting is starting with, let's say, feet and head to get started. So start with the not the full end of the spectrum, but pretty close to the full ends of the spectrum, and then soles of my feet and brain,
Hmm.
which and I found that saying I'm free to notice ease in my brain produces some phenomenal results. Um,
Yeah, it's been interesting, and that hadn't wasn't a place I thought of because I was kind of noticing places where I could literally be aware of ease if there was
hmm.
any,
Hmm.
and we can't actually, I don't think, sense that in our brain, but
No, you can't because there are no nerve endings inside.
no,
But what you
but it
can do is notice the effects of ease in your brain elsewhere in your
or you
body.
can notice the effect of thinking of of
Thinking.
noticing ease in your yes, and it I agree. It seems very helpful, and maybe it is helpful because it is so indirect and maybe even a little nonsensical. But it's
Hmm.
you know
I actually don't
it's
think it's
nothing for us to be able to grasp onto or try and make happen.
well. That's a huge advantage right there. It's a tough one for students to mess up because to try to make to try to implement on their own because who knows how you would do that. I think,
Mhm.
right?
Right. I think that's kind of what I meant about the
Yeah.
nonsensical. Not that
Mhm.
it didn't make sense in a physiological way.
Right. So, what's been your experience using these kinds of directions with your
Well,
students?
well, I use them for myself and with my students in two different ways. And one is kind of the way we've been describing, that it's really just going through a sequence or knowing like the brain one. I'm free to notice ease in my brain. It's a formula, a direction, a thought that we know, we explored and we've noticed is helpful. It
Hmm.
helps free us up. I know I particularly like that one, the brain one, when I'm working at my computer.
Hmm.
And it's immediately apparent when I think that how I have been kind of very intent, which is tension in my neck and other places in my body. Um,
Right, right.
and But the other way that I use them is is um, kind of leaving it open ended. Is I will think I am free to notice ease in my, and I will see what shows up.
Hmm.
Do you see what I mean? And then
Yeah.
when I thought that just then, I noticed a freeing in my hip joints. So I'm not prescribing ahead of time where I'm going to notice. It's more like I'm freeing myself up to notice somewhere and just seeing where that might be.
And I think that's interesting. I haven't actually done that, but that seems to be somewhat related to Mio's
I think
approach to to
that's how I
noticing
kind
ease.
yes, and I think that's how I first started doing it, to be honest, was that way round because I was working with Mio's way of doing it.
Hmm.
And it's they're both valid. It's different ways, but I've come round to using the freedom direction formula of noticing
Hmm.
for both things. So yeah.
Right.
Um,
I think just in terms of one of the words in that phrase, I'm free to notice ease in my whatever. The word notice,
mm,
I think is a genius choice for the. It's just exactly the right word
yeah.
because it doesn't convey any idea of latching on to a feeling or efforting
Or doing
or
anything.
doing anything.
Yeah.
And I realized after I had used it a bit that it's a word that Marjorie Barstow used a lot. Maybe that's where Mio got it because we
Maybe.
both
I think
studied. But
yeah.
Marge used to would work with someone or get them to experiment with something, and then she'd say, "Well, what did you notice?" That she didn't say, "What did you feel?" Because we don't want to
Hmm.
encourage that so much. But what did you notice was a kind of a regular phrase that she would use.
Actually,
And
that's really interesting. I'm wondering if that because I got that from my first Alexander teacher. That was her constant question. It seemed like, and when you first start lessons, it's like,
Mhm.
oh well, I don't know.
Right, right,
What did I notice? Something
right,
happened. I don't know what it was.
right.
So
But
yeah.
it's a good word because it
Yes,
doesn't convey any idea of efforting.
exactly.
It's a
Yeah.
very soft word, really. It's very, very soft. And when you've used those kind of directions with your students, what's been their reaction?
Very helpful and in both ways, but I really kind of came to sharing the kind of just sequencing or just kind of going through from kind of one end of the body to the other, um, uh, as a way for sometimes people can get a little stuck, like, oh, I've got to notice somewhere now.
Hmm.
And if nothing's coming immediately into their attention, um, a little tension can creep in and that kind of wanting to find somewhere. So there's simply just naming the places and kind of going through in a sequence, um, can get out of um, that kind of potential problem.
a sort of a subtle end gaining problem, you might say.
Yes,
Yeah,
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 yeah, wanting to find that place. And
right.
then if they can't, then there's a little bit of, oh, and that kind of starting to look for it rather than simply noticing brings tension. So then if you just have a kind of prescribed sequence, if you like, that takes that aspect out of the equation.
Yeah, I've used it with students as well, and they do like it, and they
Hmm.
don't. They like the freedom aspect that they don't feel they have to notice anything.
Exactly. I mean, that's why I love the freedom
Yeah.
directions overall. But and in this case specifically it means what I like about so if you think about the formula is I am free to notice ease in my, let's say, feet. That's where we started. Just the I am free to means I may notice, I may not notice, but I'm free to notice if there is any. And so it really takes out any like have to
Yeah, and and
about it.
and what I've been playing around with just the last little while is start before I actually start using that direction. Let's say I'm using walking as a framework. I'll begin my walk by just specifically noticing, for example, my feet. Just letting my
Yeah.
attention go to my feet, not trying to change anything, just I'm curious what's going on with them. Because I think saying I'm free to notice ease in my feet does a little bit presuppose that you know how to notice. So I
Hmm.
think it doesn't hurt to actually practice noticing a little bit
That's
beforehand.
good. I hadn't quite thought of it like that, but now I'm thinking, I think that's what I asked you to do in that first email.
Oh, that
I
might
said,
be. Maybe it
um,
maybe it came
yeah,
back to me.
yeah. But it occurs to me that is what I asked. So
Oh,
just
okay.
simply notice your feet, or think I'm free to notice my feet as you walk. Notice what that's like, and that can often be very helpful in itself.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. And one of the places that I've been experimenting with it a lot is swimming, um,
Mm.
and particularly kicking and coordinating kicking with arm movements. I have a little tendency in doing the crawl or back crawl, for example, that when I engage my arms, the kicking is not quite as free. And I found that it's a wonderful direction for kind of letting, basically allowing my kicking to continue undisturbed by the fact that I'm using a fair amount of effort with my upper body.
Oh,
And
that's
that's a big
great.
that's
Yeah.
something that's always been an issue for me in the past. I could
Oh,
kick
good.
and I could use my arms and I could combine them, but not optimally, it seemed to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
And so
that's
that's helped you get in the
yeah, and
right.
also both in kicking and in especially backwards swimming, kicking and also walking. When I say I'm free to notice ease in my brain,
Mhm.
instantly my legs rotate inward a little bit, which is definitely where they need to go without me doing it
Oh,
consciously.
that's very
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
so I find and I don't know whether we've talked about this, but I've expanded from the brain. I figured why stop with the brain, so why not include this spinal cord? So you have the brain and spinal cord, the central nervous system, and then why not include the peripheral nervous system? So I sometimes morph into I'm free to notice ease in my nervous system, or
Yeah, I
even occasionally I've regressed to my nerves are free.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wrote a nice blog about that, and I actually adapted that sequence that I've been using in running, because when I'm running, I need something. Running, I'm not a, I'm not a, I haven't been running very long, let's put it like that, and I don't run very far, and I'm just trying to get back into it a little bit. So it's hard work for me. um, and
Hmm.
anything I needed to think about too much is like too much for me to take in with everything else that I'm doing and the the strenuous activity that I'm in that's for me. So having a prescribed sequence
Hmm.
was really helpful that I can just sort of run through while I'm running, and I found that very helpful. And my little sequence for that, which came directly from you, I start with the feet or the soles of my feet seems even more helpful than the feet.
Hmm.
So sole then to the spine. So I'm free to notice ease in the soles of my feet. Then the next one will be I'm free to notice ease in my spine.
Hmm.
And then the next one is I'm free to notice ease in my brain.
Hmm.
And then the next one is I'm free to notice ease in my entire nervous system, or just shorten that to my nerves.
Hmm.
And then I'm free to notice ease in myself.
Hmm. And you could add yet another one. And I'm free to notice ease in my environment.
Yes, you had mentioned that, and I've
Hmm.
played with that a little bit. That's really interesting. I had forgotten that while running, though. I think because I kind of got this sequence in my head, and
Hmm.
that's been what's helpful. But I even noticed just then, just speaking those words and going through the sequence. I don't know if you could even hear it in my voice, that I things changed. I felt easier in myself.
Yeah, it's
Just
a
calmed down. Yeah,
it's a pretty interesting direction.
yeah, yeah.
And another area that I've taken it into, so that's the nervous system, but there are other systems, and I've been playing around with sequences like I'm free to notice ease in my diaphragm and in my breathing, or I might add ribs and lungs
Yeah,
and breathing.
yeah,
I'm free to notice ease in my heart and the
yeah.
circulatory system,
Well,
or,
it's
or
interesting because the
yeah.
heart one that came up in a class I taught last week. I'm not sure she was quite thinking of it in the way you're thinking of it, but I
Hmm.
don't think it matters. It had a helpful effect. That I'm
Hmm.
free to notice ease in my heart, however you think that is. You know,
Hmm.
I think that's lovely and
And
helpful.
there are other systems, and one of them I've just come back from a trip where I've had a number of cranial sacral sessions from someone in Toronto, and um, I there is a whole cranial sacral fluid system,
Hmm.
um, and you could say that system. I'm free to notice ease in that system, and
You're
it
free
came
to notice ease anywhere.
anywhere, yeah.
Yes.
And just to get back to the brain for a second,
Hmm.
lest you, the listener, think that there's not much going on in the brain movement wise, and there's not a lot. There are no muscles inside the brain, but blood's moving around in there, and the brain is the manufacturer of cranial sacral fluid.
Wow.
It's all
Yes.
produced in the ventricles in the brain. And it's like a little manufacturing process in there. So, it's not inert, even, I
Hmm.
don't think, even on a physical level. It's certainly not inert on a electrical level.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fascinating. Now, you were saying to me before we went on air something about um, the actual definitions, official dictionary definitions of
Oh,
ease and
well,
freedom, and how that might be interesting to have a
yeah.
whole.
With first thing I always like to do is look up the etymology of words, and both these words have their origins in Old English,
Oh,
medieval English, but ease also comes more also has a strong French component. Now, free, tends to be things like a, a definition might be able to do something at will, at liberty, free to choose.
Mm.
Easy might be not hard or difficult, requiring no great labor or effort. I'm reading
Mhm.
from dictionary definitions. And one is tempted to say there might be a little national component there. The Brits maybe are more into freedom, and the French more into ease. They both have a British a component to them. And then I ran across in the dictionary an idiom, which I think I'm going to
Mhm.
use as the title of this podcast, free and easy. And they
Mhm.
define that, or they say that refers to unrestrained, casual, informal, um, informal. Unrestrained,
Mhm.
though, is the word I
Yes.
like.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's really, I think, the, one of the main purposes of the Alexander
Yeah.
technique
Free and
is
easy, unrestrained. Yes, absolutely.
so.
I like it.
So,
Interesting.
and I think one thing probably one of us should add, and it might as well be me because we're getting, is that like all Alexander directions, how you apply them is at least as important as what they are. So
Yes.
you don't want to put any effort into it. It's just a virtually no effort, and you definitely don't want to try to implement it in any way. That's not your forebrain's function in all of this. And we've talked about, or I have a whole
Yes.
series of podcasts about directing, and there's a whole one devoted to how to direct.
Yeah.
So, anything
But
else that
yes.
you want to say about this new? And I should also add that we're talking in mid-May of 2017, and in a way, this podcast is, I would say, a status update on new developments. I'm sure in a year or two, we'll have some, perhaps even better ones. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? No, I think it's great. I just encourage people, anyone could just try it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just I am free to notice ease in my feet. Start there. So,
That's a
yeah.
great one.
Yeah.
Or sole of your feet,
The
I would
feet.
say. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think it's helpful to remember that, your brain up there in the head is very close to auditory, your ears, your eyes, your sense of taste and smell, and all of those senses, right? They're real close to the brain.
Hmm.
But proprioceptive information, a lot of that comes from the soles of your feet because they are what are in contact with the earth.
Mm.
And to get from there to your brain requires quite a little trip. Nerves that run from your feet right up to your the bottom of your spinal cord, which is quite long, quite a little distance, and then up your spinal cord and then into your brain. So that's just a little added thought.
Yes.
Yes.
Good to know.
Anything else that
Yes.
you want to add?
I think that's it. Let's give it a try.
Give it a try.
Play with it.
Experiment with it. Yeah, absolutely. So, my guest today has been Imogen Ragone, an Alexander Technique teacher in Wilmington. She also is a website designer, and I'll put a link to her site. I'll put a link to a page that has links to many other podcasts about directing, Alexander directing, and a link to a site that will enable you to find out more about the Alexander technique and locate a teacher in your area. And if you live in the Wilmington, Delaware area, contact Imogen.
I'm
Oh,
here.
yes, you are. All right. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.